Clint Eastwood walked into an upscale restaurant, dressed in his usual understated yet classy style. He had always preferred quiet places, but this particular restaurant held a special significance. It was one of the many businesses he silently owned. Unlike some wealthy figures who flaunted their success, Clint preferred to let his work speak for itself. Tonight, he had come in for a simple meal, hoping for a peaceful evening. But from the moment he sat down, he noticed something off about his waitress. The young woman, whose name tag read Mia, approached his table with an exaggerated sigh, barely looking at him as she tossed a menu onto the table. "You know, we do have a dress code," she said, eyeing his rugged jacket and simple jeans. Clint raised an eyebrow but remained calm. "Didn't see a sign." Mia smirked, popping her gum. "Well, it's kind of an unspoken rule. We usually cater to a more refined crowd." Clint didn't need to ask what she meant. He could tell she had already decided what kind of man she thought he was. Old-fashioned, conservative, someone she didn't respect. It wasn't the first time he'd encountered this kind of attitude, and it wouldn't be the last. "Is that so?" Clint said casually, flipping open the menu. "Well, I'm feeling a steak tonight, medium rare." Mia scoffed. "Figures. You look like the kind of guy who eats nothing but red meat." She didn't bother writing it down. "Anything else, cowboy?" Clint glanced up at her, his expression unreadable. "A glass of your best whiskey." Mia rolled her eyes. "Right, let me guess, you like the kind that puts hair on your chest, huh?" Clint simply smiled. "Something like that." She walked away, muttering under her breath. Clint leaned back in his chair, unfazed. He had dealt with tougher people than a rude waitress with an attitude. He was here to enjoy a meal, not to get into an argument. When Mia returned with his drink, she practically slammed it down on the table. "There you go," she said flatly. Clint took a slow sip and nodded. "Not bad." Mia huffed. "I don't get why. Guys like you always act like you own the place." Clint let out a quiet chuckle. "That's an interesting thought." Before Mia could respond, a man in a sharp suit approached the table. His face turned pale the moment he saw Clint. "Mr. Eastwood, I had no idea you were here tonight," the man said, his voice filled with genuine respect. Mia frowned, looking between the two men. "Wait, you know him?" The manager shot her a warning look. "Of course I do. He owns this restaurant." Mia's face drained of color. "Wait, what?" she stammered. Clint remained calm, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "Yep. Turns out I do own the place." Mia opened her mouth, but no words came out. The smug attitude she had carried all night vanished in an instant. The manager turned to Clint. "Sir, I deeply apologize for any rudeness. If there's anything I can do," Clint held up a hand. "No need to make a scene. I just came for a meal." He then turned to Mia, his piercing gaze steady. "But I do have one question." Mia gulped. Yes?" Clint leaned in slightly. "Do you always treat customers like this, or was I just special?" Mia's face turned red. I didn't know." Clint nodded. "That's the thing. You never know who you're talking to." He leaned back, finishing his drink. "But you should always treat people with respect. Not just because they might own the place, just because it's the right thing to do." The restaurant was dead silent. Other waiters and customers were now watching the scene unfold, whispers filling the air. Mia, realizing she had just insulted her own boss, stammered, I'm really sorry, Mr. Eastwood. It won't happen again." Clint stood up, adjusting his jacket. "I believe you, because if it does, you won't be working here anymore." Mia nodded frantically. "Understood, sir." Clint gave her one last look before turning to the manager. "The steak's on you tonight." The manager nodded quickly. "Of course, sir." With that, Clint Eastwood walked out of the restaurant, the entire room still buzzing with shock. And Mia? She never looked at another customer the same way again. The moment Clint Eastwood walked out of the restaurant, the weight of what had just happened hit Mia like a freight train. The once confident smirk she had worn all night was long gone, replaced by sheer panic. The manager turned to her, shaking his head. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Mia stammered, still trying to process it. I thought he was just some old cowboy. The manager cut her off. That old cowboy is a Hollywood legend. He owns this place, and if he wanted to, you'd be out of a job right now. Mia swallowed hard. Is he really gonna fire me? The manager sighed. Honestly, you're lucky. If he had told me to, I wouldn't have hesitated. He crossed his arms. But Clint Eastwood isn't the kind of man to make a big deal out of things. He gave you a warning, and that's more than most people in your position would get. Mia felt a lump in her throat. I didn't mean any harm, I just thought... She trailed off, realizing there was no excuse for her behavior. The manager didn't let her off the hook. You thought you could judge someone by their appearance. You assumed you knew who he was just because of the way he dressed. And now, you look like a fool. Mia looked around and saw the other staff watching her, some shaking their heads in disappointment. Even the customers had noticed the commotion, and a few whispered among themselves, clearly amused by the irony of it all. She felt humiliated. But more than that, she felt ashamed. The manager let out a deep breath. Look, I'm not firing you. Not yet, anyway. But you'd better shape up. Because if you ever pull something like this again, I won't wait for Clint Eastwood to come back and call the shots. You'll be out that door faster than you can say, "Get off my lawn." Mia nodded quickly. I understand. It won't happen again. The manager studied her for a moment before sighing. Good. Now get back to work. As Mia picked up her notepad and walked toward her next table, the reality of what had happened sank in. She had mocked one of the most respected men in Hollywood, thinking he was just some nobody. But in reality, he had been the most powerful person in the room. And the worst part? He hadn't needed to yell, threaten, or demand anything to put her in her place. He had simply spoken the truth. From that moment on, Mia changed the way she treated people. She stopped judging customers based on their appearances, stopped making snide comments, and started treating everyone with genuine respect. Because if there was one lesson she had learned that night, it was this: you never know who you're talking to, and respect should never be optional. Months passed and Mia kept her promise. She became one of the restaurant's most polite and efficient servers, treating every customer with the respect they deserved, no matter how they looked or who they were. She learned to check her assumptions. At the door, realizing that true professionalism meant serving with dignity, not judgment. Her coworkers noticed the change, and so did the management. Instead of rolling her eyes or making sarcastic remarks, she greeted guests warmly. Instead of assuming things about people, she listened and provided the best service she could. Then, one evening, the restaurant was buzzing with important guests. A well-known business mogul had reserved a private dining area, and the staff was on high alert. Everything needed to be perfect. Mia was assigned to the VIP section, a testament to how much she had improved. As she adjusted the silverware and smoothed out the white tablecloths, she heard the front doors swing open. The host greeted the arriving guest with the utmost respect. "Welcome back, Mr. Eastwood. It's an honor to have you here." Mia's stomach dropped. Clint Eastwood was back. For a moment, her hands froze over the table setting. This was it, the moment of truth. Would he remember her? Would he call her out for how she had treated him months ago? She took a deep breath. This was her chance to prove she had changed. Clint took his seat in the private dining section, his presence commanding yet calm as always. The manager approached Mia and whispered, "This is your table tonight. Don't screw it up." Mia nodded, steadying herself. She grabbed a menu and walked over to Clint's table, standing tall with a professional smile. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice steady. "Welcome back to our restaurant. Can I start you off with a drink?" Clint looked up at her, his piercing eyes studying her for a long moment. Mia held her breath. Then a small smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "I'll take a glass of your best whiskey," he said, a familiar glint in his eye. "Something that puts hair on your chest." Mia's face warmed with embarrassment. He definitely remembered. But instead of stammering or panicking, she nodded respectfully. "Of course, sir, I'll have that right out for you." Clint gave a slow nod of approval. "Good to see you again, Mia." She blinked in surprise. He remembered her name. This time, though, she wasn't scared. She was proud. Mia went about her service with care and precision, ensuring that Clint's experience was flawless. When she returned with his meal, she placed the plate down gently and said, "Your steak, medium rare. I hope it's to your liking." Clint cut into the steak, took a bite, and nodded. "Not bad. You've improved." Mia exhaled, a small but genuine smile forming. "I have, sir. Thank you." As the night went on, Clint enjoyed his meal without incident, and when the check came, he left behind a generous tip, far beyond what was expected. As Mia picked up the receipt, she noticed a small handwritten note at the bottom. "Respect is earned. You've earned mine. Keep it up." She stared at the words, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride. That night, as Clint Eastwood walked out of the restaurant, he didn't just leave behind a tip. He left behind a lesson, one Mia would never forget. As Clint Eastwood stepped out of the restaurant and into the cool night air, Mia stood by the bar staring at the note he had left her. It was a simple message, but it carried more weight than any paycheck or compliment she had ever received. She folded the receipt carefully and tucked it into her apron pocket. It wasn't just a reminder of her growth. It was proof that people could change, and second chances were real. From that day forward, Mia carried herself differently. She worked harder, not just for tips or recognition, but because she truly understood the value of treating people with dignity. She realized that a person's worth wasn't determined by their appearance, age, or background. It was about how they treated others. Word of her transformation spread among the staff, and soon, the manager took notice. A few months later, she was offered a promotion to head server, a role that put her in charge of training new hires. Mia didn't hesitate. She accepted the position and made it her mission to teach every new employee the lesson she had learned the hard way. Treat everyone with respect. You never know who you're serving or what kind of impact you might have. And as she passed by table 7, the very spot where Clint Eastwood had once sat, humbling her with just a few words, she smiled, knowing that the greatest lesson she had ever learned didn't come from a lecture. It came from a quiet man with a powerful presence in a steak, medium rare. Years passed, and Mia's dedication to her work never wavered. She became one of the most respected employees in the restaurant, known for her professionalism and ability to handle even the most difficult customers with grace. One evening, as she oversaw the dining floor, a young waitress, nervous and fidgety, approached her. "Mia," she whispered, glancing toward the entrance, "there's this older guy at table 7. He's dressed kinda simple, and I think he might be in the wrong place. Should I, let him know?" Mia's heart skipped a beat. She turned toward the table, already suspecting who it was. Sure enough, there he was, Clint Eastwood. He sat at the same table as before, his expression as calm and unreadable as ever. The room felt different when he was there, as if his very presence commanded respect without him even trying. Mia smiled and placed a reassuring hand on the young waitress's shoulder. "Don't assume, Lily," she said gently. "Just treat him like you would any other guest. Trust me on this one." Lily nodded and hurried off, but Mia knew this was her moment. She grabbed a menu and made her way to the table, feeling a strange mix of nostalgia and gratitude. "Welcome back, Mr. Eastwood," she said, standing tall. "It's been a while." Clint looked up, the slightest hint of a smirk playing on his lips. "Good to see you again, Mia. Still keeping this place running, I see." She chuckled. "Someone has to." Clint nodded, clearly pleased. "I'll have the usual." Mia didn't even need to ask. "Steak, medium rare, glass of whiskey." He grinned. "You've got a good memory." Mia simply smiled. "I had a good teacher," as she walked back to the kitchen to place his order. She couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The night she had mocked him felt like a lifetime ago, and yet it was a defining moment, a turning point that had changed her for the better. Later, as Clint finished his meal, Mia brought the check to his table. He glanced at it before slipping a few crisp bills onto the tray along with another small note. Mia picked it up and read, "Proud of you, keep it up." She felt a lump in her throat. Looking up, she met Clint's gaze, and for the first time, she truly understood the weight of his words. "Thank you," she said sincerely. Clint tipped his head in acknowledgement, then stood and made his way toward the door, disappearing into the night just as he had years ago. As Mia tucked the note into her pocket, right next to the first one he had left her, she knew one thing for certain. Some people walk into your life to teach you a lesson. If you're lucky, they come back to remind you just how much you've learned. The years continued to pass and Mia's career flourished. She wasn't just a head server anymore. She had moved up to assistant manager, then general manager. Eventually, the restaurant's owner decided to expand, and when the opportunity arose, Mia was the first person considered to run her very own location. She had come a long way from the sarcastic, judgmental waitress Clint Eastwood had first encountered, and while she had learned many lessons along the way, none stuck with her as much as the one he had unknowingly taught her all those years ago. One evening, as Mia was going through paperwork in her office, her assistant knocked on the door. "There's someone here asking for you," he said. "He didn't make a reservation, but he seems important." Mia raised an eyebrow. "Who is it?" Her assistant hesitated. "He just said his name is Clint." Mia's heart skipped a beat. She didn't even have to ask. She already knew. She smoothed out her blazer, took a deep breath, and walked onto the restaurant floor. And there he was, Clint Eastwood sitting at a quiet table by the window, his presence just as strong as ever. He looked up as she approached, that same knowing smirk on his face. Mia smiled. "Welcome to my restaurant, Mr. Eastwood." Clint chuckled. "Told you you'd go far." She pulled out a chair and sat across from him, unable to stop the proud grin spreading across her face. "And I owe a lot of that to you." He waved off the sentiment, but she knew better. "You figured it out on your own, kid. I just gave you a nudge." Mia shook her head. "No, you did more than that. You taught me the most important lesson I've ever learned. Respect isn't about who someone is. It's about who you are." Clint nodded approvingly. "Glad to hear it." Mia gestured toward the menu. "So, what'll it be?" Clint grinned. "What do you think?" Mia laughed. "One steak, medium rare, and a glass of whiskey coming right up." As she walked toward the kitchen, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life had come full circle, and this moment, this second chance at doing things right, was proof of how far she had come. And as Clint Eastwood sat in her restaurant, enjoying a meal she made sure was perfect, Mia knew one thing for sure. She would never forget the man who had changed her life with nothing but a quiet lesson and a steak, medium rare. As the evening went on, Clint Eastwood enjoyed his meal, and Mia made sure he was treated with the highest level of service, not because of his fame, but because he had earned her respect in a way no one else ever had. The restaurant buzzed around them, filled with customers who had no idea that a living legend sat among them, quietly enjoying his steak and whiskey. But for Mia, this wasn't just another VIP guest. This was the man who had set her on the right path even without trying. When Clint finished his meal, Mia returned to his table with the check, but before she could place it down, Clint slid a credit card across the table. "This one's on me," Mia said with a grin. Clint raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" Mia nodded. "Consider it my way of saying thanks." He leaned back, studying her for a moment, then chuckled. "Well, I'll be damned. The kid learned something after all." She laughed, shaking her head. "Took me a while, but yeah, I finally got there." Clint picked up his whiskey glass, swirled the amber liquid inside, and took one last sip before setting it down. "Proud of you, Mia. You built something good here." Those words meant more to her than any award or recognition ever could. As Clint stood up to leave, Mia extended her hand. "It was an honor having you here tonight." He shook her hand firmly, giving her that signature Eastwood stare. Next time I'm paying. Mia smirked. I won't fight you on that one. With a final nod, Clint made his way toward the door, the same way he had all those years ago. But this time, Mia didn't watch with regret. She watched with gratitude, knowing she had made the most of the lesson he had given her. As she turned back toward the bustling restaurant, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the 2 notes he had left her in the past. Respect is earned. You've earned mine. Keep it up. Proud of you. Keep it up. She folded them carefully and placed them back in her pocket, close to her heart. Mia smiled. She had come a long way, and thanks to Clint Eastwood, she would never forget where it all began.